Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar The Last Airbender, the podcast where myself and my good buddy Chris go through Avatar, the world of Avatar, starting with, of course, Last Airbender and moving our way through Korra. We're in the second book of Korra. We are on the episode Beginnings, Part 1. Now, I've been very excited about doing this for a long, long time. I love these two episodes. They're so unique compared to anything else that's in Korra. And I just was really excited to get to them, basically. How I don't even know where to start with this, Chris. How much of a surprise was this episode to you going in?
Yeah, fair one. I was like, oh, it's a flashback episode. And they pulled it off to a point where, because the surprise is potentially a negative surprise, right? I'm watching it going, when it's like how I became the first Avatar. I'm like, oh, I assumed it was like a mythical, spirit-led thing that was just sort of there from the dawn of time. I'm like, this is, how often are our origin answers satisfying?
Right. It's a risky game,
we got
right?
ourselves some... Yeah, we got ourselves some Metachlorians here. Like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And there were parts of that were like that. To be honest, it's like, oh, so the first Avatar's just a bit of a rebel. Like, okay, guess that fits.
Yeah.
But by the end, I was like, okay, that was all. That was actually good. That was a satisfying, entertaining 22 minutes that didn't seem to. Gave more of a, oddly, for something that dealt with, talking frogs and spirits, gave more of a real-world answer than I was expecting.
Yes.
But you know what I mean? It's like the whole, like the whole Doctor's name. I assume, I wouldn't want to find out his name was Bob. There's no satisfying answer to that question. And if you do find out that his name's Bob, then you're like, well, that's a real-world answer. So that's what I mean. It's a real-world thing.
I should clarify for anyone listening. When he says the Doctor, he means the Doctor as in the Doctor from Doctor Who. But if anyone's not a fan of Doctor Who, that would have been a very confusing sentence.
Yes.
So that character it goes by the moniker the Doctor and never actually gives their real name. At this point, since the show started in the 60s, finding out the Doctor's name would not be a satisfying thing.
Apparently Moffat, though this isn't a tangent, Dan. I said no tangents this episode. This is just it was an observation. Although now it's slightly becoming a tangent. Moffat has said that somewhere in one episode they did give an answer, but basically the fandom rejected it. The fandom were like, nah, that sounds shit.
What, back in the 60s?
At some point, yeah. At some point.
I don't know that. Must be an episode I've not come across. This is, you're right. It's a risky move, right? Giving answer when it's, because I've always felt very strongly about, Doctor Who's a perfect example of this exact problem. I just think sometimes you have to just leave the origins of a character like that ancient mysterious. No answer you give will ever be more satisfying than whatever people come up with in their head. And it's a really risky move doing this because it will always divide to some degree people because it won't be the answer they had. But thankfully, I think what they've done here feels really baked in to the universe, really well thought out. They've not retroactively, and we'll get to this in trivia, but they figured this out during season 2 of Avatar, the original series. And you can tell. Because it really fits in to what we know about the world. And it fits in even in small details like the use of the lion turtles. Which... Deus Ex lion turtle. From the end of Avatar. And you asked me... we talked about it at the time, they've introduced this concept of a giant wise lion turtle that gave Aang extra powers. Is that... Is that just a thing? And I said, well, they cover it in Korra, and you were like, great. It doesn't really help the problem here in Last Airbender, but I'm glad to know they at least come back to it. This episode is that, and I think the way they laid out. 1 second, sorry. Typical timing, and I guess this is because we record Saturday mornings, but someone's mowing outside, so sorry if anyone can hear noises. Bloody loud, whatever it is. Can you hear it, Chris, or is it just me?
No, I can't hear it. So, usual rule of thumb means it might not be being picked up on mic.
Oh, well, sorry to anyone listening if you can hear extra noise on my end. I'm a huge fan of these episodes because I think this is the only time this trick has ever worked, and I think it helps again that they figured it out when they designed the concept of the show. You know, when they were working on the early seasons of the show, you know, baked it in. And I just think for me, and maybe this is just luck, maybe this is just luck of the draw. These answers kind of were that perfect balance of surprising for me, like I wasn't expecting things to have played out the way they did. It's not my version of necessarily that I had in my head of how this all started. But because they fit so well with my understanding of the world, that I found them satisfying. But I guess if your understanding of the world or your reading of how the world came to be is different and it doesn't gel with it, at least in spirit, even if not in practicality. Because for me, it's like, okay, the physical, what happened is different to what I might have imagined. But in spirit, I like what they're going for in terms of how it works with the world's mystical elements. But I could imagine somebody it not gelling on either front with their viewpoint of how the world works. And then you're in trouble, you know? And obviously, we've only watched one part for this podcast. Part one. Part two will be the next episode. So from my perspective, obviously, I'm thinking of this whole two-parter as well. You know, there's still another half to this. So for you, Chris, you're sort of halfway through, probably very tentatively thinking, God, I hope they land this because there's a lot going on. Do you think that hurts it? Or well, I guess most people probably watch these together. I think they aired similarly around the similar time. I'll check that, but yeah.
I think it was, you know. It just feels like an anthology, you know. It feels like a spin-off origin story or something. Like I don't know. Like I guess.
Yeah, these two episodes aired together, 18th of October, 2013.
I know this sounds
10 years old.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking that, but to be honest with you, there's not a lot of pressure on it. Like, I know this sounds, and I don't know, maybe this is one of those catch me on a different day and I'd feel differently things, but I know how stupid this sounds, but I'm not, because we talk about every episode of this show for an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, but I can't think of any other word. I'm not invested enough to truly be worried about that. Do you know what I mean? If I don't like the explanation, it will be like, oh, okay, fine. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna be up. And I appreciate that there will be people. And invested kind of feels like the wrong word because that also suggests I don't care. That's not true. Like, God, it would be a really impressive achievement of Dan's to get me to watch, you know, 7 seasons of a television show if I'm not in any way invested. But what I'm saying is I'm not emotionally invested. It's not like the answers. Even if I don't like the answers, that's not going to put me in a bad mood for the rest of the day. Although I appreciate that's not everyone's relationship with the show, and for some people that would be. But like you, I think it all tracks. You know, we got bending, we got spirits, we got a big sea turtle. Like, fine, whatever. I think the sea turtle's a good example of that. Like, yes, this is adding slightly more context to Deus Ex Sea Turtle, but like, do you know what I mean? I'm not like, it's when the sea turtle appeared, I wasn't like, oh, that damn sea turtle. I was like, oh, okay, cool. They got some plan involved with the sea turtle. You know, when I think back, you know, I really, it is funny, isn't it? I do, yeah. Deus Ex Sea Turtle, man. That sea turtle appeared out of nowhere. I'm sorry. But we don't need to have that conversation again. But, like, yeah. It's interesting. But I think it was, and to be fair, though, I mean, you could, you know, it's one of those, and again, this is maybe it's no, it's not a tangent. Let's do what we like to do, which is you know, set the internet on fire by using The Last Jedi as an example. I could understand someone saying, oh, but to me, the avatars are when we think about older avatars, we have them in the context of sort of their final self. If you only watched Korra, you're not seeing Aang dicking about in the market. You're seeing this wise man who tried to, stop someone in court and all of this sort of stuff, right?
Right. So when Korra interacts with old avatars, it's them at their peak. When Aang interacted with previous avatars, it was them, at their peak. Like, so Roku as a wise master, Kyoshi as a warrior. Yeah, peak or the avatar they became, not grew into, right? So I could understand potentially someone watching this and going, "Oh, I don't like seeing the first avatar, slightly obnoxious, slightly impatient, slightly clearly good natured. They're trying to save an animal. They did also try and attack someone, attack a group for the food. So there's back and forth on that morality wise. But certainly immature. Certainly, I think a little arrogant. Maybe you could argue there's some negative traits, right? And I could understand a lot of people going, "Oh, I don't like to think of the avatars like that." But much like Luke hiding away in a cave for however many years, there is history. Like, that does track with the show. Like, every avatar we've seen is like that. And it's more interesting. I'm sorry, but I don't want to see an episode about a guy who's already perfect and figured it all out. That's not interesting storytelling. And all these people that wanted Luke to be like hero Jedi man, perfect, wise, and all that in Last Jedi, just cool, but that would have been a much less interesting movie. It's a much more boring story. It's like, okay, he did that. Now what? Like, where's the conflict? Where's any level of interest in this character now? He's done. Like, he doesn't have anything to do. Like, so there's no growth. There's no room for growth in that character. So yeah, I agree. And I think particularly in this case, like, because we're learning how he became the Avatar, we're seeing his journey, the way we saw Aang's journey from being obnoxious and like trying to avoid his duties and to becoming like this very committed Avatar. The same way we're seeing Korra coming from this sort of place of arrogance to maybe being humbled as the series goes on. And we'll actually be coming back to that idea a little bit later for the feedback from last series. There's a comment that I wanted to come to, but I think it makes perfect sense that Wan's journey matches, and we are seeing Wan's journey. He's Fire Nation. He's the start of the Avatar cycle. He's the first one. He's clearly from essentially a version of the Fire Nation, those early days. And it makes sense that the sort of brash Fire Nation will be the first, I think, to steal from the Lion Turtles. But started to use his power for good and started to use his power to try and create balance because he's met the spirits. He likes the spirits, trying to do right. So we already see those signs of him learning that and going on his journey. And you just know that's going to lead, even from this first episode, without having seen where it goes, that's going to lead to him going to other Lion Turtles and learning those skills. That's just, the structure. And that because that's the journey all avatars have been on. So the idea that Wan's journey, he didn't. No one pops out fully formed. He has to go on the journey to learn and master all the elements the same way that every other avatar did. And again, seeing him fully formed would not be as nearly as interesting. So
I am intrigued as to.
Go on.
No, I am intrigued as to whether we're going to see them connect it to the more spiritual side, in the sense of every avatar dies and then someone else becomes the avatar. Mm-hmm. That sort of mythical element to the avatar. I'm intrigued how they're going to turn this sort of... I assume they will. Mm-hmm. I hope they will. Sorry. How they're going to, connect those dots.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, yeah. Second, we'll come back to that for the second episode because I think that's heavily, connected to where that goes. But let's talk about this one. So we haven't done a little recap yet. So I'll very quickly recap for anyone who doesn't recall. Avatar 1. It's a society. Basically, he lives in a world where humans have been sort of driven out of the forests by spirits that seem wild and dangerous and scary to them, and they're all living protected on the backs of lion turtles. Who, I guess, by living on the back of a lion turtle, the spirits don't come and get you. So societies are living on there, but they have to go hunting. So there are hunting parties that go out. So to help protect them, the lion turtles that are looking after humanity dub them, or sort of give them powers that allow them to go out and hunt. And Avatar 1, who's like basically Aladdin, he's so much Aladdin in the first few minutes. Like he steals food, then gets chased by the guards, and then goes to eat it, and ends up giving it to those less fortunate than him. Literally the opening of Aladdin, like literally the opening of Aladdin. To even to the fact that it's bread that he's giving out, madness. Anyway, so they show his nobility pretty much immediately. Because he's, as you said, stealing food, but but doing the right thing with it. He decides basically that the way that these places gather food and supplies is they go out with powers given to them by the lion turtle into the wilds. That those powers protect them from the spirits. They get fire because it's Fire Nation, or an early version of, and then they go hunt and come back. Wan decides to steal that power from the lion turtle by claiming he's going out to hunt, and then just wandering off with the power, not returning it at the end, as is the sort of societal rule. And he's banished, where he goes out into the world and starts meeting spirits and realizing that they're maybe not as dangerous and scary as people think. And towards the end of the episode, we get a bit of a conflict between his old human tribe and the spirits that he's befriended, putting him immediately in a situation of the balance, the figure that stands between humanity and the spirits, trying to keep that balance. So he's positioned himself that way just naturally, regardless of what happens then. And then at the end of the episode, for anyone who doesn't recall, he comes across two spirits that are struggling. I just realized I've tried to go into this like I'm going to edit out that section, which I probably will, but just for people who won't know, the sound has returned and it's really loud, so I am sorry. It's a guy trimming hedges nearby, and there's nothing I can do. Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, there's the two... Go on, sorry.
That's what I was saying, actually. It's quite, we started recording at 8:30, so it's only, it's 5 to 9, which is quite early to be doing something that loud for... neighbours, do you know what I mean?
He's got ear protection on. He's wearing big ear protectors. Mm. Yeah, but it's this the complex in which my flat is located, and they just hire these people to do this stuff. That he's like a contractor. This is really loud.
Yeah, just quite early for a residential area, I guess.
No, I don't disagree. All right. So sorry everyone, there's loud noises. So for the third time, Avatar Wan comes across these two spirits that are struggling. One of them sort of tricks him and says, "Oh, this one's helped me here for 1,000 years or a millennium or whatever." And he's like, "Oh God, that sounds awful," and he frees them, thinking he's doing the right thing. And then it becomes clear, the two spirits, one is the force of light and peace, and the other is darkness and chaos. And Wan just set darkness and chaos free. Now, on that point, very quickly, I don't think it's that unclear, and feel like maybe one should have known better. One of them is all like, "Oh, but free me," like evil sounding and looking, and just like generally portrayed. I know I'm putting storytelling rules on it, and I guess one is actually just looking at two beings, and one saying, "I've been trapped for 1,000 years," and the other one saying otherwise. So I guess from the story perspective, but from the real world's, from the narrative world's, own rules and perspective, he's doing the best he can with the information he has. But from a storytelling perspective, I'm just looking at it from the outside going, it's very obvious which one of these is the evil spirit and which one of these is not. But anyway, so
it's very clear. It's like, very clear. You should not be doing that, buddy.
Yeah. You literally don't know what's going on here. Maybe don't. Let's break it down. So that was that was a little recap of the story. I say a little recap. For me, it's felt like it's gone on for 10 hours because we stopped in the middle to investigate noises. So any particular things about this you want to pick out and sort of talk about? We haven't talked about the Korra wraparound either yet.
Well, just the what? Sorry,
the Korra wraparound, like the stuff with her at the beginning.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You know, she might be losing her powers. I like the idea of, you know, spirituality being used to try and heal her. Oh, let's just say it, shall we? Avatar 1, really? You gotta do a pun with the name. There you go. Okay,
I love it. I love it to bits because it's one, but yeah, it's one. One is very close to one, and in pronunciation, yes. I love it.
I think there's something quite, you know, upsetting about the notion of, you know, and it feels painfully real. The notion of, you know, there's always a Fire Nation in there. There's always some bad guys nicking everyone's food. But that was interesting.
Well, I guess I guess it's the same premise. That's now really loud. Is he closer? Yes, he's closer now. That's so annoying. Yeah, because I think, like, you know, the premise in the original show was, oh god, that is really distracting me. And I've got noise cancelling earphones in. Like, I'm guessing you can still really hear that, Chris.
I can hear it. Yeah, a judge on how loud the listeners will, I can't give, but yeah, I can definitely hear it.
Let me just check one thing.
That is usually the rule of thumb.
Yeah, the mic's definitely picking it up. Oh well, sorry. Because obviously for you listeners as well, like, it's further away from the mic, and the mic is quite directional, so like it will be quieter, considerably so compared to my voice. But in the real world where I'm sat right now, it's so loud, it's actually making it hard for me to think. And also as a fucking, you know, ADHD, it's like it's actually stopping me from being able to string thoughts together. So it's not just that it's a noise, it's that it's actually distracting me because I can't not think about it. It's right there. I genuinely, right, this sort of stuff, like, this is like, I know it's not the guy's fault, he's just doing his job, but I genuinely just want to go out and take that thing off him and throw it into the road and be like, thank you for turning that off and being quiet.
Yeah, unfortunately, it really is not his fault.
No, I know, I 100% know that. Doesn't stop me from being annoyed at the situation, though, because it is, yeah, I don't know what to do, and I'm going to have to edit this episode an absolute ton now, and that's really frustrating, because I was hoping to avoid that. I'm going to... Okay, he's gone a bit further away. I'll carry on. What was my even point? I don't remember. Oh, yeah, the Fire Nation.
Yeah, Fire Nation.
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting about the way they've sort of gone this is it really does support, and I think it's one of the reasons this episode doesn't bother me so much at all, is because I think it does support what we were shown in The Last Airbender, right? Because in The Last Airbender, we had a world where, yeah, humans are imperfect, and some of them will choose to do bad things. It doesn't mean, like, everyone is bad, but there will always be sections of people that take advantage of others. And I think the idea that, yeah, in the little society that's built on this lion turtle's neck, back, which appears to be sort of the early Fire Nation, the beginnings of the Fire Nation, there are people that are taking advantage of those in sort of there's like a poverty, you know, going on, and there's people that seem to have plenty. You know, that kind of inequality is it's more a comment on humanity, right? There's always going to be a mixture inside within these societies. Humanity is imperfect, and it's one of the reasons the spirits don't seem to get on with them. You know, they see that greed, they see that suffering, and they don't care for it, and that, you know. The idea of showing an older society and showing it is in any way other than that would undermine the original guides, because it would suggest the Avatar has made things worse. It would suggest society has gotten worse, but actually people are always going to be people. You just need checks and balances in to ensure these things don't go too far. These things don't, hurt as many. You try and reduce how much hurt you can do and how much damage you can do if you're one of those people. So, like, the idea of having the Avatar sort of keeping man in check, keeping humanity in check, is a good idea. And like it's good that like you have one sort of seeing that kind of corruption early in his time as the Avatar. And developing from there, I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't know. Did you say it was comforting to you? Was that the word you used to know that they've always been like that? Like, how did you phrase it?
No. I think just upsettingly realistic. I think
right.
That.
Like, there's a sort of a. For me, maybe I'm just borrowing my own phrase because I do think for me there's like a comfort in knowing, okay, humanity's always been like this in this world. It's not like things have got going downhill.
I think but the main sort of takeaway or the interesting thing about this episode for me is the spirits being like a race, essentially. Like, whilst spirits have existed in the Avatar world we've seen, they're living amongst men here or humans here. They're out in the world. They're literally like creatures. They're going to a spa retreat for part of this. They're talking frogs and all that sort of stuff. I thought that was really interesting. And especially the sequence of both sequences of the forest. And sort of the first one where it's the horror of him walking through all these things, and there's such stunning visuals in that. The thing that looks like fruit and then turns out to be bugs and all that sort of stuff, and him lying down for some rest, and then the ground swallowing him up, and then equally one then using those things against the humans later is also really effective and clever.
Yeah, I love that moment. I think that's really good. I think that that whole sequence of him being terrified, in other words, so much creativity has gone into that. And it's I made a lot of notes about that. I wrote down about the fruit that turns to bugs, so the frog that turns giant, the plant that's like a man-eating plant. Really good. Let's talk about the characterization of the spirits then, because I guess you're right. Because spirits have spoken before. Aang has conversed with spirits, but I guess you're right.
We've never seen them line up and queue up
as their own sort of society, rather than just rogue beings of spiritual power. They're just living their lives too.
We've never seen them. We've never seen them queue up. We've never seen them queue up for a spa. I mean, that happens. That they all queue up and line up and go into a spa retreat, essentially, in this episode. I never thought we'd see that from the spirits, no matter how much they've talked in the past.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's that giving them to some degree a certain amount of like demystifying them. Like they're not mythical creatures now, they're just another species. And that's a different way to look at them, I think, than the show has previously done. Because I think the show was very much, by design, separated the spirits as being these sort of unknowable, mystical things. And characterizing them and making them their own sort of society that's actually in sort of conflict with humanity is a really interesting idea. And it also obviously plays into the themes of this particular season of Korra too, where she's looking to understand the spirits better because spirits are attacking people. So yeah, and I think when you look at it here as well, and you think like, so humanity and spirits didn't exactly share the sort of the physical plane particularly peacefully. They were in each other's hair quite a bit. They did not get on, and it kind of you start to understand why there's a need for an avatar in this world. Particularly, sure. I really like. I don't think he ever says his name in the episode, but he's dubbed. Wait, he's in the credits or someone has named him at some point. Ai. He's the spirit, that Wan mostly befriends, the one that's kind of the guardian of the spirit oasis. He's kind of like the big cat, whatever he is.
His Appa, essentially, is sort of what he becomes.
No. I'm sorry. I'm
Talking
talking about the guy that the guy that runs the Spirit Oasis.
Oh yeah.
The guy that won't let him in.
Yeah, and then and then by the end calls him his friend, which is very sweet.
Yes, yeah. So I is his name, but I don't know where that's come from. I don't know if that's in the credits or if the creators have just said that. 'Cause I don't think he ever says it in the show, but unless he doesn't, I've missed it. But I think having one sort of befriend a spirit like that is also a really nice choice, a really smart choice for what they do here in terms of like setting up, establishing again that like the bridge between the two. He's literally he's got an interest in both, and when those hunters come back, one defends the spirits, but he also does it in a way that doesn't necessarily hurt the hunters. It's only when Ai comes along and it goes a bit further. Maybe I really love it. It's grotesque, but that image of Ai possessing that guy and then leaving, and then him being sort of half and half, and then I think Ai says something like, "I think he looks better now anyway." I don't. Yeah, there you go. I wrote the line down. I don't know what he's screaming about. He's better looking now.
Is that what we're to assume happened to the dude,
the tree guy,
that one knows, who's like a bit tree-like at the beginning?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's quite. That's the other thing actually. We saw it's quite a funny episode. I do think I don't know what he's screaming about. He's better looking now. It's funny. I do also like. I love the I'm Bushy the Bush Spirit gag where one's trying to get into the Spirit Oasis. Yeah. I enjoy Ai's description of humanity as being ugly and lacking respect for nature, because then it sort of makes you go, well, that's why humanity has been driven out of the spirit wilds into these little cities they've got on the backs of the lion turtles. Maybe the lion turtles see the potential in humanity in the way spirits don't.
And they're not wrong, are they?
The spirits, no, they're not wrong. Just very destructive, and we get evidence of that here. And let's talk. Well, we talk about one of the bigger elements of this because let's talk about because his sort of mount, his Appa, his traveling companion buddy, of course, his act of selflessness is saving this cat deer from those hunters who want to eat it, basically, and that becomes his sort of equivalent to sort of Appa or Naga. It's a cat deer. It's a really beautifully drawn creature, and we'll talk about the art style in a minute because obviously this episode has quite a different art style to the rest of the stuff. But a really interesting choice to have. Also, the first Avatar also has that that structure of I've got a sort of an animal traveling companion with me. It's just like all avatars that have come since have followed the structure of what happens to one here. Do you think we feel, because obviously they're going through essentially the story of an avatar across 2 episodes, right? From being a brash, obnoxious youth, getting their first bending power, and then presumably going into the others in the next episode and sort of telling their story, and they acquire their animal friend, they go on their adventures, and presumably we might get as far as seeing what happens when they end. Do you think truncating an Avatar's story into 2 episodes hurts the story in any way, shape, or form, pacing-wise?
No. I thought it was, sure, we get, essentially a training montage, but fine. Like, you're not gonna want to see, what do we want? We want the details. We want the headlines. We don't want to see Avatar 1 training with the spirits. Like, that's fine as a montage. We don't want 10 minutes of the episode dedicated to that. And what's the alternative? It's a 3-parter. Well, then the complaint is it's gone away from Korra for too long.
Yeah.
I think they're really pushing that in a show that's, 16 episode seasons or whatever it is, doing a 2-part flashback to something else. It will link, obviously, but, that's quite a bold mood as it is. Like, I'd absolutely rather quicker pacing, but also, like I say, I think it was perfect use of a montage in this. Like, essentially, right. We don't need to see him becoming more one with the spirits. We can we just know it happens because he's aged, and we've seen that montage, and we've seen him defending the spirits and, you know, fighting off, and we get that whole, the way he used fire, it was like it was part of himself sort of thing. So
yeah. But also, I think, you know, and what this episode does, which I think is really interesting, and I think a lot of people, this is a sticking point, because obviously, you know, the original Avatar Last Airbender series kind of indicated that a lot of the early benders learn how to master their element from nature. You know, the firebenders learn from the dragons. You know, the earthbenders learn from the badger moles. And some people feel this story discounts that. I disagree. We see Aang learning from a dragon in the episode. Did I say Aang? I meant one. Because I don't know why. I think I just deleted a note that we got a glimpse of Aang and Kyoshi and Kirk, because I was like, I don't know why I wrote that in my notes. You know, one is shown mastering firebending from a dragon. Who's to say other people don't do that to master their elements also? They go out into the spirit wilds. They want to learn how to master their element, whatever it is. If their lion turtle gives out airbending, or their lion turtle gives out waterbending, who's to say that the earthbending people don't go out and then meet badger moles? And they, you know, to start with, they were just able to throw rocks, but mastering it meant getting down and sort of in the dirt, learning nature, you know, learning with those creatures. I just don't think one discounts the other. One specifically is demonstrated here as mastering firebending through, you know, working alongside the dragons.
Yeah, I think this episode almost proves that. And this episode also makes it very clear. There's a lot of cities. It's a big old world. Like, you know, and we really zero in on one person learning bending. So, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think anything is disproved on that here, for sure.
Yeah, and because... Yeah, well, there's another point to that argument actually that I'll make once we see the next episode, because I don't want to give anything away, because there's another side to that as well.
And I don't know if this links into any trib, but do you want to talk a bit about the? I'll let you lead in it, because you're, I assume, either from the trib or in general more knowledgeable on it than me. Talk about the different animation styles.
Yeah, so to sort of emphasize that this is all set in like an earlier time period, they use a lot of artwork and designs sort of that mimic ancient sort of Chinese like ink wash paintings, like designs that you get on like Japanese like woodblock prints. I think there's also I read this, I don't know, I'm not as familiar with this as Tibetan tapestry paintings. Yeah, I mean, I'm not certain that's a style, but that's, you know, that's in the triv. You know, all sort of inspiring. So basically, all this sort of ancient artwork from sort of East Asia, taking that art style to visualize how the world looked back then. I just think really does. Well, one, it's aesthetically pleasing to look at. Two, it's a really nice nod to the ancient art styles of these places. Because it's older art styles, it also, you know, helps us sort of imagine it being, you know, it's also, there's a time element of it, right? These ancient sort of, you know, Chinese like ink wash paintings and these old Japanese woodblock prints, it's a time thing. It immediately takes you to the past in your head visually as a cue. But then on top of that, it's also helps make the world feel like this is a world where spirits and humans are clearly more coexisting, and it makes the world feel more lived in by spirits, less physical. Everything feels kind of like it's shifting. Like there's a weird sort of magical vibe to this visual art style that really does not only land how long ago we've gone and honor all these ancient art styles, but also, just practically speaking, really does show a world that was more magical, that was more blended with the spirits, was more, you know, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. Like, yeah, it's just got that sort of mystic realms vibe. Like it's the whole thing is just like, I don't know. I can't. Words are failing me, which is frustrating because this is a podcast where words are what we use to say how we feel. But I do think it really does help visually illustrate the magical nature of this world. So it just ticks all the boxes as an art style. It's honoring an old thing, looks great, helps push that idea. I just think it's fantastic. I love every second of it, and how they achieved it is really interesting actually, because you'll notice the character designs are the same. Like Juan looks like if you took him out of this world and plonked him next to Korra, he's not that different in his art style and his drawing. It's the world that they've really done that with. And what they've done to achieve it is they've changed the color palette, reduced lighting effects, and they've increased sort of stylizing of the backgrounds and the bending effects. So the fire looks like an old drawing of fire, rather than like realistic fire. But the character designs have been left the same, which I think is just really, really cool. Just perfect. Like the people who animate these episodes and do all the production design of the show are geniuses, basically.
Turns out they know what they're doing.
It does turn out they know what they're doing, and obviously under the direction of the show creators. But it's such a smart idea to do it this way. I can't express in words how much I love how these episodes look. Both, they're amazing, and I'm assuming you felt really, similarly.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. It really looks beautiful. Beautiful. I don't know why I'm saying beautiful like that. Yeah, in particular that montage, and but also the way the spirit creatures. I don't know if that's the right word, but just spirits, I guess. The way they've been designed so uniquely. Each of them feel like it's not just we need a batch of this. It feels like it wouldn't surprise me the art style on each one is so specific and well realized that it wouldn't surprise me if they'd also, it feels real. It feels like they've also worked out a backstory for each of those characters, Yeah. And really unique and different to each other. But in particular, that sort of horror-esque montage of the forest and what the character of one looks like before going in the forest and after the night in the forest, where you can see the non-slept horror across him. I think the whole episode looks beautiful.
Yeah, and I like even before they leave the lion tail and they're in like a town and stuff, like the way it's also not just how they've drawn things, but they frame the shots differently. Like they frame them at these like interesting sort of like flat angles to really lay out the every frame of painting idea. Like it's not just the art style, but also how they frame everything makes it all look like ancient art. And I think you could pause pretty much any frame of this episode and be like, oh, that's an incredible shot. I don't think there's anywhere in this episode you're not going to find that.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I also thought it was really nice. So Juan takes fire but doesn't return it, and his idea is to come back with the fire and help create equality within his little society, within his little city. He wants to redistribute food from I think the Chews, I think they're called, who have weapons and have clearly sort of bullied their way into like a lot of this society's resources. And it says so much about Juan as a character that the first thing he wants to do when he gets that power is not use it to get himself food, but to create balance within his little town, within his little city. Again, he's incredibly well characterized considering he only has this episode's 22-minute time frame to be set up. But the first thing he tries to do is redistribute food and resources. And in attempting to do that, he doesn't win. He doesn't succeed because it requires him to hurt someone, and he can't bring himself to do that. There's this moment when he's got the fire and he's over this guy and he's about to sort of like, I don't know, end him, like essentially, to win the fight. But the guy says, you can't do it. You can't bring yourself to hurt me. And then he's caught and expelled because he couldn't quite bring himself to do harm to another, even in the interest of everyone else. And I always like character work through choices rather than words. You know, and this is true in real life. I don't know. We've all met people like this. People who like to tell you what kind of people they are. You know these people? Oh, I'm the kind of person that doesn't take any nonsense. Really? Okay. Well, we'll see. How about you demonstrate that? Because I'm not sure that's true.
My favourite one is, you know me, I tell it how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually behind people's backs. It's weird.
Yep.
You know me, no hold bars. I'll just say it how it is. But yeah, but not. Will you? Because it feels like you mainly say it how it is when you want to criticize someone.
Yeah, right. You pick your moments quite very specifically to say it how it is.
I feel like all those people that say it, you can tell I'm thinking of someone specifically, can't you? I feel like all those people,
tell them how it is.
All those people that say it how it is. There's a key end to that sentence that is always there but never said, which is they tell it how it is in their opinion.
Yes. Yeah. But like someone who will tell you what they're like rather than demonstrate it, because often, like, you know, I've heard people. It's not even those people aside. Like you get the people who are just like, oh, I'm the kind of person that will do this or that, and then they don't really. You basically what you realize is you're hearing how they want to be perceived. They're trying to control that narrative, right? You're hearing the version of them they have in their head. You know, the thing they're aspiring to be, and you can tell a lot by hearing what people think they are. I think, and often though you'll find, or at least sometimes you'll find the actions don't match up to what they're saying. You know, and I try to honor myself in my behaviors as well as my words, you know, in my life. And what I really like about what this episode has done, and this is true of narrative storytelling too, you've got a character like Wan. You want to convince me he's the start of the Avatar cycle, and you know the idea that like this thing started with him. Well, you better damn well convince me that this is someone who's going to be interested in change, but and balance and doing what's right, but also not willing to go as far as murder or harming someone else to achieve that. Because that is a fundamental thing that goes through all of the avatars. You know, every avatar has their own quirks, their own foibles, but ultimately, when you boil them down, their essence is usually the same. And this is true also, take a shot
for
Doctor
sure.
Who, right? Every Doctor is different in Doctor Who. But their fundamental core beliefs remain every time. And I think showing one not say like that, because again, it's shorthand in an episode that you've only got two. Like you've got 2 episodes to introduce me to this character, sell me this on this person. The genius of this episode really lies in how much of it is spent showing me that Wan wants to do the right thing. First thing he does with fire is not help himself; it's help others. The first thing he does once he befriends the spirits is demonstrate, or once he's out there with the spirits, is demonstrate a desire to help other creatures in the cat deer.
But again, he is also true though to the other avatars in that, you know, one of the ways he does that in terms of trying to help people is to break the rules and go against the sea turtle and lie to get out of the day and say he's not, you know, feeling well or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact nuances. You know, he's cheeky. He's a bit conniving almost, and a bit obnoxious. I think that runs through his character as well in this.
Yes, yeah, and exactly, and that's but that's the journey, right? Like, you know, you would like to think that by the end of these 2 episodes, he'll be less so. You know, he started by being a little bit like scrappy and a little bit like, you know, I'm gonna cheat to get ahead a bit here. But again, he only ever did that to benefit everyone, never just himself. And that is, I think that's the difference, isn't it? If he'd have been a bit obnoxious and a bit sneaky to get fire, and then been like, all right, see you guys, I'm off to get food for myself now because I can, because I've got fire, then yeah, you're being a dick. Like, but he took it. He took to give. He Robin Hooded it. You know, he was conniving about it, but he did it for everyone. He didn't just do it for himself. And I think that really does separate him from, you know, it's what stops that from that obnoxiousness from becoming like character ruining, because you understand where he's coming from. He risks being expelled
sure.
and thrown out to the spirits by doing that. He risks being removed from the society he's in. As the Joker would love to say, we live in a society. So yeah, I think it's really, really clever. And I still love the idea that, like, in a world where Aang kind of got his energy bending powers from a lion turtle, the idea that the powers come from the lion turtles and the lion turtles seeing some hope in what humanity could become one day, choosing to protect them from the rest of the spirits that clearly don't feel that way about humanity. I just think that makes a ton of sense. I just think there's so much logic to that, and humans getting power from that, really sits right somehow with me. It just fits. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think that's a really good. I'm not going to say retcon because it might have been planned all along. It's a really good link. It's a really good pulling together of the threads.
Right, because I think if the word is true that they figured this out, whether they were going to tell this story or not at the time, question mark, probably not, I assume, because otherwise they'd have gotten to it during Last Airbender. But the idea that they figured all this out roughly in season 2 does kind of track for me. I feel like it's baked so clearly into the world, and it all fits so neatly, I think, with very little, for me at least, very little, like, big gaps. And I know I can already the comments, feedback from Nick from last series. You know how this year there were 1 or 2. I was like, we got a lot about this. I feel like this is an episode we're going to get a lot about as well.
Yeah.
So then, to wrap, because we talked about all the different elements. I think just from an entertainment perspective, I think this is just a really good episode. I just think it's really, really charming. I think Juan's a really fascinating character and ultimately a very likable character. I think not only is there some fun action and great visuals, it's a story you get quite quickly invested in. In a very short space of time, you really do want to see where it goes. You really are pulled into one story. And the bonus is the mythology stuff we're getting alongside. But I feel like even if this wasn't a mythology fest, I'd still like this character and his journey. I'd still be invested. So it works on a base level, entertainment level as well. Sort of on a that sort of baseline. Was this enjoyable to watch? Yeah, it's an absolute ton of fun. It's funny. There's some good action, some really creative visuals. So even if you're the sort of person that doesn't like the stuff this does for the mythology, I still think as an episode, it's really, really cleverly put together and really, really well written and really well thought out. And they clearly put a lot of time and effort into this one.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. Shall we triv it up?
I'm gonna give you some trivia. Actually, let me just quickly check I didn't miss anything, because I've made so many notes about this. Oh, sorry, very quickly. Apologies. Can you reverse the triv it up? Can you just... Wow, that was... that was amazing. Yeah,
that was better than you thought it was going to be, isn't it?
Yeah, you committed to that, and I love it. I really like that Korra is dropped in waters to cleanse her spirit, and she has this out-of-body experience, but also in the episode, we see Juan injured, dropped in water to help cleanse and heal him. 10 points.
Yeah,
just nice little mix there. I did not. One thing I did not like about the design elements: the pig sheep and the pig chicken. No, thank you. That was stuff of my nightmares. No, please, no. I never wish to lay eyes on those monstrosities again. Did not like that at all. That was all sorts of wrong. Didn't like it.
Fair enough.
I know this show does a lot of animals merging, but for some reason the animals merging in this art style, upsetting. Deeply upsetting. I made a note. I wanted to cover it. It was really bad.
Fair enough.
Like, I will wake up in the night tonight, cold sweats. There's a sheep pig. Now you'll be like, the sheep pig can't get you now. I also enjoyed that his relationship with Ai leads to him just being dubbed Stinky.
Yes, that was very funny.
Yeah, because Ai doesn't get named in this episode for years. Nadia and I referred to that character as Stinky, even though it's him that calls Wan Stinky because we didn't know his real name.
That seems fair.
Yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah, okay, that's all the notes. All right, now we can trim it up.
You sure?
I'm certain.
Confident?
Confident.
Okay. Let's trim it up!
Let me give you some trivia. Right, so, scroll down because I just realised I was looking at the notes for something else. Here we go. Okay, so the basic concept for the origin story used in these episodes had been in development well before the creators began work on this book. They've been discussing the idea since Book 2 of Avatar The Last Airbender, but did not present the story to other writers until much later. And I guess that shows as well, because it does feel so well thought out. You can kind of tell maybe that they'd spent a lot of time, cooking this one before they'd put it out there. Like, let's not commit to any of these mythology things until we really know it works and that it fits and makes sense with everything else. You can tell, I think.
Yeah, it's done very well.
Beginnings Part 1 and 2 were the first episodes in Book 2 to go into production. So despite the scheduling conflicts that prevented them from handling the first half of the season, Studio Mir were able to join the rest of the production crew for the extended creation process. So, yeah, these episodes were basically the first ones put into production, presumably because they wanted them to be... These were just like... They clearly understood these episodes were really important and wanted them animated perfectly and right, and took the time to make that happen. So I think that's really good.
Nice.
The spirit telling Wan that the other lion turtle is on the other side of Nonia Business Valley recalls the scene in The Blind Bandit where an Earthbender student told Aang that Earth Rumble 5 was located at the Isle of Nonia Business. Enjoyed that. I really enjoyed this as well. So this episode contains a number of homages to Hayao Miyazaki, creator of many of the Studio Ghibli films, such as Spirited Away and all that stuff. But specifically, the scene with the spirits, procession across the bridge to the Spirit Oasis is very, very similar to a scene from Spirited Away. One of the spirits even has that sort of mask design, which I think is based on like sort of ancient art anyway. Ancient depictions of spirits, but it's like a cloaked being with like a mask attached to the front, which is obviously a very iconic image from Spirited Away. Also, the idea of humans having a very distinct, unpleasant smell to spirits is also a plot point in Spirited Away. Mula, which I believe is Avatar 1's cat deer that he saves and then befriends, is reminiscent of the red elk Yackle in Princess Mononoke, which is a movie that also deals with the conflict between humans and forest spirits. And in that movie, the elk serves as a mount for the protagonist. So yeah, lots of references to the Studio Ghibli stuff here in this episode, which is I think that's right. So musically, there's a lot of stuff with the music in this, but so Jeremy Zuckerman's direction from the creators was to use even more traditional East Asian instrumentation. So he used two instruments. Now, I'm sorry I'm going to pronounce these wrong, but I've had to Google both these instruments as well. The Guqin? Guqin. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. Sorry. It's a stringed instrument that sort of lies down flat like a piano and you pluck at it. I googled it and I listened to some people playing it on like YouTube and stuff. It's a really nice instrument. I like it. Sounds nice. Then also a shakuhachi. I think I'm pronouncing that right, which is kind of a wind instrument. It looks a bit like a flute, but it's much larger. It's quite long. Well, is it much larger? It's deceptive in some of these photos. I think it can be different lengths because I'm seeing some photos where it looks closer to the length of a normal flute and some where it looks like quite long. Yeah, there's different lengths of this instrument. So there's some where I can see it's about as long as a person's arm, and there's some where I can see somebody playing one and it goes down to his knee. So that's but yeah, both really interesting instruments to choose to use to create the sound. Is there any other one about the music? One of the themes developed for this episode namely the one when the Banti sages identify what is affecting Korra is based on the music of Indonesian percussion ensembles known as gamelan. Again, hope I'm pronouncing that right. And the music that plays during one's interactions with the lion turtle uses the motif associated with the lion turtle from when Aang.
Keep talking, but I just need to answer our door now. We've interruptions galore, but keep talking.
Sure. I've only got a few left, but yeah, absolutely go. Well, the great thing about this is now I don't know if Chris still has his headphones in, so I could just say what I like, and he doesn't know, or maybe he does. I just like Chris is just a real. He's just he's got his headphones in. I was just gonna be like, Chris is a real prick, but he can hear me. So anyway, so yeah, the music. It's so hard for me to continue while Chris is like bounding downstairs and then presumably talking to what I assume is a delivery man. Yeah, it is a delivery man. So the music used for the lion turtle is based on the music used when Aang meets the lion turtle. Is the short version of that trivia. This one will be of interest to you, Chris, actually. The markings on the forehead of the fire lion turtle are identical to those on the head of the lion turtle who gave Aang the ability to energy bend, which I think implies that is literally the same lion turtle, which I think is quite interesting. I've just realised I should have saved this one to last because obviously you're not back on a mic yet. Chris has told me to tell you that he does find that interesting. So there you go. So it's not confirmed because, maybe lion turtles' markings aren't as distinct as human facial features. Maybe a few of them have literally the same markings. But I think that does heavily imply it's the same one. This is actually the first episode in which Naga does not make an appearance. Now, that leaves Korra as the last remaining character to have appeared in every episode of this show. Because every other character has had at least one episode they've not appeared in. Number got
I'm back on mic.
You back on mic?
Yeah. Let's. I don't know. I quite like the idea of, especially an ensemble show, there being a character that doesn't appear. There being no character that appears in every episode.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. I think this season's really helped that stat because I think based on season 1. Tenzin for sure was in every episode. Korra and Naga, and I think obviously this season we've had an episode out with Tenzin. Obviously Mako, Bolin were never going to be in every episode because they don't get introduced until second or third episode anyway. Asami doesn't get introduced till the 4th or the 5th, so those characters were always going to be sort of like not in every episode. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. And the last remaining character other than Korra that was in that situation was Naga, but not appearing this week. Naga is now on the list. The technique that one uses to separate Rava and Vatu, the two spirits, is similar to the technique Zuko used to free Azula from Katara's waterbending hold in the Crossroads of Destiny. When I saw it, I recognized it. Thank you for confirming, Triv. So now you're back on mic. Any thoughts on anything you wanted to add on the Deus Ex sea turtle being potentially, or as you call it, sea turtle, lion turtle, being potentially the same one that Aang spoke to, the one that's in this?
I like that idea. Yeah, I think that's quite cool. The notion that they've survived all this time and the notion of them almost sort of watching all of this unfold. I think that's quite cool. I quite like it. And also, it fits with the character we're shown here. Like, one of the Deus Ex elements of it was the fact that the sea turtle's just like, all right, here you go. The notion of... was the sea turtle a spirit? I can't remember. Were they a spirit in the finale? They weren't, were they? They were a real... No, they were a real... He was guided there by spirits, yeah. The notion, we've clearly, and whether it's... George Lucas making a stormtrooper bang their head in the prequels or not. One of my things was like, seems a bit willy-nilly with his powers. I mean, fucking, even more so here. Sea Turtle's dishing them out to anyone that asks. Seems all you got to do is ask politely, and he's like, yeah, all right, here you go. have this,
Yeah,
lads.
'cause
So yeah,
it's funny, isn't it? Because I don't think they. The one thing I would say actually, we haven't had a lot of criticisms for this episode, but one thing I would say is I think it would have been nice to clarify the sea turtles' motives, because I think I have to fan-splain a little bit to get to the sea turtles see something in humanity and wish to protect them, so they've allowed them to live on their backs, protected from the spirit wilds. And then when they do want to go out, it's gone, all right, here's some power that you can use to protect you while you're out there. To sort of justify their behaviour, I've had to sort of go, all right, they see something in humanity, they want to protect us. Because otherwise, the motive of the lion turtle is a bit mysterious. One thing that's just occurred to me, though, Chris, is it makes so much sense that the first one that Wan interacts with here is the same one Aang did, because Wan is early Fire Nation, clearly. And when Aang meets the lion turtle, he's in the Fire Nation. He's on the Ember Islands.
Yeah, that does make sense.
So, yeah, that makes almost too much sense. Very cool. Hadn't thought of that until just now, but I like it. Yeah, so again, I wish the episode maybe made their intentions a bit clear, but I guess leaving some stuff mysterious is fine. Also, it's fine for me to not really know what skin in the game the lion turtles have to protect humans. Why have they gone to such efforts to protect them, and then supply them with powers to defend themselves? So, I guess we'll have to wait to see if there's any more information on that front from the next episode. So, let's talk about feedback from last series, Chris. Hit it.
Listener feedback we didn't get a chance to get to last season because we don't record these live.
Am I good? Can I go?
Yeah.
Just want to make sure you were finished. I don't want to, hi.
We've had a lot of interruptions this week. We don't need a 2-minute guitar solo done by mouth from me.
Yeah, that's fair. So, yes, hi, I'm Dan. Welcome to feedback from last series. This is, of course, as Chris just said, we go back through, because we didn't record these as we went, we got a lot of feedback from last series' episodes that we then didn't get a chance to respond to, so we're covering it now. We had a comment, a really interesting one, from the Ponderer. Now, also, separate note, Ponderer, sayer of smart things, thinker of things that are interesting, go check out the Ponderer's YouTube channel. They cover all sorts of stuff from Doctor Who and Korra and Avatar to, whatever the latest Marvel movie is. Like, there's tons of content on there, all worth checking out. Absolutely, go check out the Ponderer. Now, the Ponderer, I never know whether their real name is public through their YouTube channel. So I'm always tempted to use their real name because I know their real name because I follow them on Twitter. Also, and they're in our Discord, but I never know if that's public from the YouTube side of things, so I always just stick with the Ponderer. So if you're okay with being named, let us know, and in future I'll name you if you'd like. But I'm always cautious about using people's names, because sometimes people are comfortable signing up to a Discord with a real name, but then don't necessarily want me repeating it.
Yeah, that's not public facing.
Yeah. So I'm being polite, but also if you'd like to be named, just let us know. I'm fine. YouTube channel is just the Ponderer. You can also find their comments under several of our videos, and their comments are commented from the Ponderer YouTube channel account, so you can click on it and get all their video content there. In fact, they did a really great review of Korra, which I had to stop watching because it was like, you know what? So they put it out after or around the time we'd finished doing season 1. And I watched, they went through it chronologically. We're talking about season 1. And I was like, this is really interesting. And then they got to season 2 and I went, I've got to stop. I can't, because I can't, if I listen to this now, it's going to influence my thoughts on season 2, because I try not to do other reviews of things we're reviewing. So I will go back to that video, but it was really good. Really well thought out. Lots of interesting thoughts. So, yeah, they said, because last year we talked a lot about Korra and Korra's character, and how Korra's character had not gone down very well, and that people found her obnoxious and rude and all that stuff. And we were sort of saying, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Aang was also not the nicest character to start with, shirking all of his duties, being like, oh, save the world. No, I'd rather ride the, turtle penguins or whatever. Just being generally speaking, a little obnoxious child, which is, standard for being a child. I think And we said, well, can you judge Korra's character? We debated that idea of, well, Korra's supposed to be older, but she's still a flawed character that's going to presumably learn across the series, right? Series of the show. And one interesting point that's brought up, because we sort of said, well, can you judge her for that? You know, if she's going on an arc, maybe you need to see the whole arc before you can really, make that call on her character. The Ponderer says, I do think there's a caveat to what Dan's saying about judging Korra's character arc. Unlike Avatar The Last Airbender, Korra was initially planned to be only one season, and I'm fuzzy on exactly how mapped out her arc was at the time of writing season 2. With that knowledge, I think it's fair to say that the show can be criticised in a way that Avatar The Last Airbender couldn't. Does Korra improve by the end of season 4 isn't necessarily a catch-all defence for the writing of season 1. Now, really interesting point. So, in response, I would say, first of all, we do know that the initial plan was that the show could be multiple seasons. It was designed to be villain of the season, but that didn't necessarily preclude future seasons from existing. So, to some degree, I do think the writers were hoping this not just to be a 12-episode miniseries. The idea was to make it like... What was the show they used as an example? I feel like it was 24 for some reason, but that's in my head. I don't know where I've got that. But the idea
I
of
think that is right. I think I do remember you saying that.
Yeah, so in one of the interviews, the writers talked about how every season the villain would change, but we'd have an overarching through line. So I do think the plan was to develop Korra across multiple seasons, even from day one. But the Ponderer is correct here in that they did not know they were getting a season 2 with any certainty until after season 1 was produced. So they're in a tricky position there, aren't they? Because do you complete Korra's arc in season 1 and then have a character that's already basically learned everything they're going to learn and therefore have nowhere to go with them? Or do you leave them somewhat undeveloped so there's stuff to go on if you get to season 2? That's a really tough position to put the writers in, and I think you can feel that. You can feel that in the ending of season 1 when all of a sudden we're like, oh, and by the way, Korra healed everyone and she got all her powers back. Bye!
Yeah, I think you could also feel it in the... it's so funny, isn't it? Because I really respect this show for doing something different, but I could understand... I think you could make a debate for having an avatar learn... I know we've already seen it, but I think you could make a debate that having an avatar learn a new skill each season is almost as core to the show as the Power Rangers morphing and getting in their big Zords. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could understand why someone would be like, no, actually, I do want to see that element. I do want to see. That, for me, is intrinsically the show. I don't necessarily feel that way because I think they've done interesting stuff, but I you know what I mean? I think it's interesting, that dilemma of that feels like a really core part of a show set in this universe. Yeah. But obviously they've chosen to go down a different route. But I could see that people being like, oh, that's a shame. The show in my head I'd want is that because of how intrinsic to this world that notion actually seems.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think that makes sense. Yeah, it's because I think it's like, yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think it's, even though they undid that and didn't end up going down that route, and I do respect them for choosing not to. You're right. It is a big part of the core of the show. But from a perspective of developing Korra as a character, I just think they were damned if they did, damned if they didn't. If they did wrap Korra up in season 1, then they literally have left themselves nowhere to go. If they didn't, and then they don't get another season, then you've got an unlikable protagonist. Quote unquote unlikable protagonist, because they never got to complete their arc. It's tough, that. So they had to kind of one foot in, one foot out. And I think this show's production woes and the uncertainty around it and all that stuff really does very often prove to be the source of the show's issues.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it?
Rather than the writing team, creative team making bad choices for the show. It feels like if they'd just been told, right, you've got 4 seasons, figure it out, and just left to it, they would have probably produced something a little bit more coherent, a little bit more consistent. I don't think we'd have had the same issues with the final episode of the first season, because it would have all dovetailed nicely into itself. Yeah, I think so. I mean, some issues obviously don't come down to that. Like I do think overstuffing this season was a misstep, but. And that's a misstep they might have made regardless. But on the whole, I think a lot of the bigger issues this show experiences are that, come down to that. So there you go. That was feedback from the series. Thanks everyone for getting in touch. If you want to do that yourself, head over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic UK, where you are able to leave comments that we may get to next series. Shrug. I don't know. Maybe I'll get bored of hearing Chris do songs and we'll just nix this segment.
You'll never get bored of that.
You can also get to us at mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk, or if you have other feedback you'd like to give, you can also get to us via our Discord, but Discord comes through our Patreon. So if you would like to support us, you can go to patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where for as little as $1 a month, you get access to episodes of this podcast 1 week earlier than the release on like iTunes and Spotify and all those places. Also, you get access to our bonus content, like Nothing But Lyrics, which is a podcast where we make fun of or try to analyse, or sometimes both, the lyrics of various famous, mostly like 90s, early 1000s pop songs, because that's the era Chris and I grew up. And there's some really weird, shitty lyrics from that period of time that are fun to make fun of. We've got a very specific era we've covered so far, Chris.
That's very true. Yeah.
But that's fine. It's whatever we're interested in covering. I think that's allowed. But also, it gives you access to, as I mentioned, our Discord, where you can directly interact with us, and then you can leave comments on the episode. We have a sub page, or whatever you want to call it, a thread. No, it's not a thread. What's the word they use for it on Discord? For channel. It's a channel. We have a channel on Avatar The Last Airbender where feedback from this podcast tends to end up. So you can go and give us feedback in there. And also, of course, it helps to support us through the Patreon if you have the spare cash. And it's amazing. We get these really nice messages sometimes from people who are like, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to, support with less, or I'm going to have to cancel my Patreon altogether. They always say it with such they're always so sad. We get these really lovely messages about it, and I'm just like, I promise you, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You don't need to, apologize for not giving us money. That's absolutely.
Yeah, just give what you can, what you're comfortable giving.
And
if you want to give anything at all, don't worry at all. If you can't and don't want to.
Yeah, if what you can give is nothing, then do that. If you're in that position but you'd still like to support us, a few other ways you can do it, of course, is by heading over to your podcast app of choice and liking, reviewing, subscribing, whatever options they have for you to interact with the podcast there, because that does genuinely make those podcast apps more likely to suggest us to other people. And on that subject, you can do that too. Tell a friend. You got a friend who likes Korra or Avatar in general, point them our way. That helps too. Or, you can be more passive and just keep listening. People undervalued the act of just continuing to listen. That also is a way of supporting us. That helps, In
both the podcasting world and just society.
Yeah. Agreed. Please continue to do that. Unless you're, of course, not enjoying this, in which case, amazing. You've gotten, 70 odd episodes into this podcast, not liking it. That's impressive. But yeah, feel free to jump off here. That's fine. There are other podcasts. Other podcasts that maybe will suit your taste better. I think that's everything. So thank you everyone for listening. We do genuinely still boggles my mind that anyone listens to anything we have to say. Thank you all for taking the time. That is everything for this episode. Thank you all. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to review Beginnings Part 2.